Hi, I'm Kelsey Davidson from BDA Financial. Happy holidays. As the year wraps up, I wanted to review two major concerns that we see in our meetings: taxes and retirement. Taxes and retirement can be a nightmare for many people with today's complex rules and regulations. The 401k plans, IRAs, and other retirement accounts come with many tax traps that even the smartest investors can fail to see. Here are just a few assumptions that we hear frequently from our meeting. Number one, I'll be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. This is not always the case. Once you retire, you no longer have several tax deductions you once did. Your home may be paid off, so there's no mortgage interest to deduct. You also have no more kids to claim as dependents, and your annual tax deferred, your 401k or TSP contributions have stopped, which was reducing your income. You're also going to find that when you hit 73 or for some 75, you have RMDs, required minimum distributions, that must come out of your tax deferred account. We also know that future tax rates may be higher than they are today. Let's face it, the tax rates now are low when they are viewed in a historical context. The top tax rate of 37% is actually a bargain compared with the 94% of the 1940s, or even the 70% range as recently as the 1970s. And if you're considering today's political climate and growing national debt, future tax rates could end up much higher than they are today. The second assumption is that my lifestyle cost will be lower. Retirees want to have fun, which costs money. You are more likely to want to have time to travel or engage in some hobbies you didn't have time for before, which is not cheap. So the income that you've set aside for yourself in a retirement may not be much lower than what you were actually making at your job. And the last assumption, the 4% rule of thumb. The 4% rule is a popular retirement withdrawal strategy that suggests retirees can safely withdraw the amount equal to 4% of their savings during the year they retire. And then you adjust for inflation each subsequent year for 30 years. However, due to high inflation and market volatility, the rule is a little less reliable now. While the 4% rule is a reasonable place to start, it doesn't fit every investor's situation. And just a few caveats. This rule doesn't include taxes, investment fees. It assumes a 30-year time horizon, and it applies to a very specific portfolio composition, which is 50% stocks and 50% bonds. Many of the major tax law changes were introduced in 2017's Tax Cut and Job Act, and they will sunset or expire in 2025, reverting to the rules that existed before the act was signed into law. This includes the tax tables that you see on the screen that we've been using for the last 6 years. Many taxpayers will see their tax rate increase by about 2%. So for example, the top individual estate and trust income tax bracket would go back up to 39.6% from the current rate of 37%. In 2023, the estate and gift taxing for federal estate and tax thresholds is $12.92 million per individual, or $25.84 million for the couple. In 2026, it reverts back to the old laws, pre-tax cut and job levels, and it will be approximately $6.8 million per individual, or close to $14 million for a married couple. Many are pointing to a tax policy as both the cause and the solution to the debt crisis. Some have suggested that the prior tax policies have contributed to the current debt crisis, and that returning to the Clinton-era policies would close the deficit. President Biden's 2024 proposed budget of 4.5 trillion in new revenue over the next decade as a step toward reducing federal deficits, which achieved in part by repealing some of the policies enacted in the Tax Cut and Job Act. So is there a history of higher taxes after massive spending? We're going to go through this timeline so that you can see that the tax rates are always in flux. We're going to start in 1913, where the top tax bracket was 7% for all incomes over 500,000, which is approximately 11 million in today's dollars. But in order to finance the U.S. participation in World War I, Congress passed the 1916 Revenue Act and the War Revenue Act of 1917. The highest income tax rate jumped from 15% in 1916 to 67% in 1917, and by 1918, the top rate was 77%. After the war, the rates dropped to 25% between 1925 and 1931. However, in 1932, during the Great Depression, Congress raised the rates from 25% to 63% on top earners. In 1944, during World War II, the top rate peaked at 94% on taxable income over 200,000. That's roughly 2.5 million in today's dollars. Over the next 3 decades, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the top federal tax remained high, but never dipping below 70%. In 1981, the Economic Recovery Tax Act slashed the highest rate from 70% to 50% and indexed the brackets for inflation. In 1986, the Tax Reform Act, claiming to be just a 2-tiered flat tax, expanded the tax base and dropped the top rate to 28% for tax years beginning in 1988. The lawmakers claimed that they would never have to raise the 28% top rate. However, that promise was actually broken just 3 years later. In 1990, the top rate jumped to 39.6%. Between 2013 and 2017, with the passing of the Affordable Care Act, it added an additional 3.8% on top tax rate, making the maximum federal rate 43.4%. It added an additional 0.9% Medicare tax on earnings and 3.8% tax on net investment income for individuals with incomes exceeding 200,000 or couples exceeding 250,000. As you can see from this chart that goes back to 1913 until 2021, that the tax rates are constantly in flux. The top tax rate of 37% today is a bargain compared with the 94% of the 1940s and even the 70% rate that was recently in the 1970s. And if you were considering today's political climate and growing national debt, future tax rates could end up much higher than they are today. So let's look at 3 general buckets that people keep their money in. We have the taxable accounts, tax-deferred accounts, and tax-free. Each one of them is taxed differently. In the taxable account, you've got savings accounts, money markets accounts, individual stock bonds, mutual funds, or a brokerage account. In your tax-deferred growth, you've got 401ks, traditional 403bs, 457 plans. You have traditional IRAs, tax-deferred annuities, I-bonds. In your tax-free income, you'll find Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, properly designed whole life insurance, and municipal bonds. For your taxable income, some of you have this as your emergency saving fund from 3 to 6 months of expenses. You'll get 1099s at the end of the year showing any growth income from these accounts. For your tax deferred growth, like your traditional 401ks, traditional TSPs, you need to think of tax deferred growth in relation to planting and harvesting. Are you going to pay tax on the seed or are you going to pay tax on the harvest? And depending on your answer, depends on if you're going to have tax deferred accounts or tax-free accounts. So today, let's say you invested $10,000 and at a 30% tax rate, you pay $3,000 in taxes to the federal government. If you're going to pay taxes on the harvest, so like a tax deferred account, you put in $10,000, but it grows at a 6% growth for 40 years, you now have $102,000. At a 30% tax rate, you're going to be paying over $30,000 to the federal government. So would you rather be paying taxes on the seed or on the harvest? For many people, they would rather be paying on the seed. And that is your tax-free income, your Roth account. It's not taxed once it's in that bucket at federal or state levels, and it does not cause Social Security to be taxed. So a few reasons to consider having a Roth account: your tax-free growth. You can have tax-free withdrawals in retirement. You decide when, if, and how to take withdrawals because there's no RMDs. Your beneficiaries won't be taxed from the inherited account. And since tax rates can change, you can protect yourself from possible higher tax rates. A little bit more about Roth IRAs. You must have taxable income to contribute. So you must be working or your spouse working to contribute to these accounts. There are catch-up contributions for people age 50 and older. For 2024, if you're 49 years and younger, you can contribute $7,000. If you're 50 and older, you can contribute $8,000. Your qualified distributions are not taxable if the account has been open for 5 years and you are 59 and a half. But you can take your principal out tax-free and penalty-free. You can choose whether to withdraw principal or growth when you take your distributions. There's no income limit on conversion. So conversion means moving money from your traditional IRA, paying the taxes and putting it into the Roth account. And if you are a high income earner, you can contribute to a Roth using the backdoor method. Required minimum distributions, RMDs. These are for your tax deferred accounts. You must be taking distributions for the first year starting April 1st of the year following the time you reach 73. After that, subsequent RMDs can be taken by December 31st of each year. RMDs are typically taxed as ordinary income. Failure to take your full RMD on time can lead to a 25% federal tax penalty on the amount not withdrawn. Depending on which account you hold, there are specific amounts you must take from each account type. And to calculate RMDs correctly and minimize taxation, it's important to talk to a professional. If you have any questions about taxes or retirement, please don't hesitate to schedule a meeting on our website, bdafinancial.com, and in the top right-hand corner, click Schedule a Meeting. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, where we regularly post things on financial planning, retirement tips, or just things to inspire your home and health. I hope everyone has a great rest of their 2023, and we look forward to hearing from you.